Okay, this is the second instructional video on human body systems. We are just going to go in order. So we did skeletal system. That means today's topic is going to be the muscular system. And obviously, you guys are smart. You can tell from the name that this system is all about muscles. Muscles. So we're going to talk about muscles today and how they work and what they do. And just like the skeletal system seems easy at first, because you guys can just say, oh, skeletal system's about bones. I know everything about bones. It's not true that you knew everything about bones. And I think in the video I showed you that there were some things or some aspects of the bone system that you didn't know about. And it's going to be the same with muscles. Like, yes, you know about muscles and you know that it's all about movement. We talked a little bit about that with the skeletal system, but there's going to be more. There's new stuff to learn. You can extend your knowledge, and I really expect you guys to extend your knowledge. But first, let's just get into the stuff that is basic and that we know. With every system, just like we did with skeletal system, we're going to talk about the structures and functions. Those are the two parts that we are always going to be dealing with every body system. The structure is what are the parts. The functions are what do those parts do, what they actually do. And again, for muscles, this is for the muscular system, this is going to be easy. The parts are just the muscles. And what they do is, what do they do? If you had to say one thing, like what do muscles do? If I gave you a second to think about it, what I bet most of you are going to be thinking, the word that's going to come into your head is move, or they help me move, and they do. But part of what we're going to be learning is that we're going to extend your thinking about the kind of movements that muscles do for you. It's not just about walking across a room or picking up a pencil. There's more to it than that. So again, you would be right that muscles are all about movement, but there's going to be some extensions of thinking here going on. Let's just start with what we know. First picture is just a picture of Mr. W in the gym. This is what you guys think of when you think of muscles. You think what's on the outside, the things you can see on the outside, those are your skeletal muscles. That's what you think of when you think of muscles. And that's what's in this diagram here. These are the ones that you can control. They control your movement. But how they control the movement is we're going to kind of do a little bit more with that, actually a lot more with that today. I'm going to come back to this slide, and I am going to say, I'm going to add on, instead of saying that the function is just about movement, which it is, but I want to make this a little bit more, a little more deep. So it is about movement, but I'm going to say it's really about contraction. That muscles contract. So muscles contract, and that's I think even a better word for if you had to do one word for the function, I would say muscles do contraction. And contraction is, if this is a muscle, contraction is just shortening or getting shorter. You shorten. So contraction is just getting shorter. Here's a muscle that's extended. And when the muscle's contracted, it is shorter. And I'm going to say that's the true function of muscles. This does lead to the movement. We're going to get back to how contraction leads to movement. But again, we're extending our thinking here. Again, back to our review. The typical good old-fashioned skeletal muscle. If we want to contract this bicep, this skeletal muscle is called the bicep. If we're going to contract this bicep, do you remember what skeletal muscle, how skeletal muscle attaches to the skeleton? How does it attach to bones? Through these kind of white guys here, you can see them. They're like gluing it on. They're gluing the muscle onto the bones through these white things. What are those called? Who remembers? Begins with a T. Tendons attach the muscle to the bone. Attach the muscle to the bone. And when this muscle is going to contract, it's going to cause these tendons to pull on the bones. If this muscle gets shorter, if this bone is coming out to your hand, which it is, this tendon is going to pull up, and this tendon is going to kind of pull down, and this hand will come up towards your chin. If this was the bicep and this here is your elbow joint that can move, if you shorten or contract this bicep, your hand's going to move towards your chin. Again, and that's a voluntary movement. You can do that whenever you want. Now, this slide is crazy busy. This is where when you see this, you're realizing that you are now in middle school and you can really start to understand some things that look very complicated. And this slide looks very complicated, but all we're going to do is I want to give you some understanding or insight to answer this question: how do muscles contract? How do muscles contract? And I'm going to teach you a little bit about the crazy machinery that your muscle cells are using to contract. Now, I don't know if you remember, but I told you that when cells do everything, like all of the work and the workhorses of your cells are very complicated machines, and those machines are always built up of proteins. You are a very complicated machine built up mostly of proteins that rock and roll and do work, and the muscle is no exception. So here's a cartoon diagram, and this is new stuff. It's complicated, but I am going to teach you how muscle uses these proteins to do the contraction that is needed for movement. So you see this black line right here, these things called the Z line. It's like a wall. Here's another one. And these things are just lined up one after another in your muscle. This is just one of them, but they just go on and on and on and on like a long railroad. And this is actually muscle under the microscope where you see all these little stripes. Each stripe is one of these, but because you have a wall and a wall and another wall and another wall and another wall, they just line up one after another into these stripes. And they are so small that you need a microscope to see these. But this is actually a tiny piece of muscle that might be just visible to your naked eye, the whole thing. But what your eye would not be able to see is the individual stripes that make up these little units. If you were going to be a doctor, if you were trained to be a doctor, you will learn that these little stripes are called sarcomeres. These are sarcomeres, and it's a contractile unit. Sarco means muscle, and mere means unit. Muscle unit. So you have these, each one of these is each stripe here is its own little contracting unit. And here's how it works. It's a protein machine. These proteins here, if this is a tiny piece of just one sarcomere, so if we're just going to blow up and look at this region here, that's over here. That's what we're seeing here. These proteins go through a series of movements. The proteins move. These molecules literally move, and they can reach out and grab and move. Proteins are like little machines. So in this part here that I'm circling now, the proteins reach out. These guys are reaching out, and they're going to grab on. Each one of these little guys grabbed on, okay? So that's what's shown like maybe here in this diagram. They grab on, And then this is like a little hand, almost like a little arm and a wrist and a hand. It pushes. You get a little pushing onto this thing. It's pushing these little hands. These little guys are going to grab on and push this way. And then after they push, they let go. So you get a series of cycles where they're reaching out, they are grabbing on, they are pushing, and they are letting go. And then they do it again. Then they reach out again, grab on, push, and let go. So if this wall here has these blue protein fibers attached, okay? And this wall here has these blue protein fibers attached. And these guys are pulling, are reaching, grabbing, and pulling these guys in this way. And these proteins are reaching, grabbing, and pulling these guys this way. These walls are going to squeeze in towards each other. They actually get closer to each other. So I don't know if you can see here, but this Z-line wall gets closer to this Z-line wall. Each sarcomere contracts. And since the muscle is made up of sarcomere, the whole muscle contracts. And that's how it works. It uses these protein machines to act like a machine and do some work and do a job to shorten the sarcomeres, and that leads to a contraction, and that's how you move. When you contract, when that happens in the whole muscle, the whole bicep with all these little sarcomeres in there will get shorter and contract, and now you're moving, all of a sudden your hand is moving towards your chin. All right. Again, we're going to extend your thinking a little bit, but there's other types of muscle, and I'm going to talk about those now. So these are muscles around your body tubes. So I have a diagram of a body tube, and your body has a lot of tubes, and your body regulates all those tubes with muscles, but it does it the same way. It does it by contracting. So let's just say so this is a body tube, and if this is a blood vessel, there would be blood in here. There could be blood in here, okay? If this is one of your airways, if this is a breathing tube, there might be air in here. You know what I mean? So there can be different things. Your body has different tubes for different things. But the walls of the body tubes, of all your body tubes, are muscle. That is something you probably did not know. Right now, you should really be thinking, wow, this is different. Like this is now I know something else about muscles. It's not just about moving my bones. So if this is, so the walls of the body tubes are here, what I have in red. So if all the little muscle cells inside the body tubes, you're going to get contraction here and contraction here and contraction here and contraction here, and throughout the whole tube. What the result of that is, if they all contract together, the tube is going to get smaller. So what happens is you're going to squeeze the tube. The tube gets smaller inside. So this is how your tubes can open up, or close down. And that is all under the control of these muscles. So this is just another diagram, kind of reviewing what I told you. If this is a respiratory tract of your breathing tube, or this is showing you blood vessels. So you've got your blood vessels. That just means a tube. And let's just say You see a big dog and you have to run away. So you're going to use your skeletal muscles to run. You're going to control that. That you control. But at the same time, your skeletal muscles are going to need blood. So those tubes open up. The blood tubes open up to give your skeletal muscle the blood it's going to need to do the running. And you're going to be breathing heavy. So again, when you run away, you're going to need more air to your lungs. So the muscle around those tubes is going to open up. So the breathing tube also opens up. Now you made a decision to run, but you did not say, hey, don't forget, I need to open up my airway so that I can get more air into my lungs. You did not say, hey, blood vessels to my muscles in my leg, I need you to open up to let more blood in. That all happens automatically. The blood around those tubes, you do not control. So these muscles are called involuntary. And because these muscles don't have all the stripes, they don't look like that muscle that I showed you in the skeletal muscle. They're not stripy. So the muscles around the tubes are called smooth muscle. And they are involuntary. They regulate things without you controlling it by a decision. So it all happens in the background. And it's crazy how your body all works together by doing the simple thing. If you're just playing sports and you're doing a lot of running, all these other muscles are rocking and rolling in your body to control the flow of whatever it needs to in the body tubes, blood and air and other things as well. Another example is when you're doing sports or running away from a dog, you're not going to be digesting lunch. Like, you don't want blood being wasted to digest food when your blood has more important things to do. So the tubes going to your guts, to your intestines, they don't open up, they close. They close shut because you don't need those. So again, some of the tubes are opening, some are closing, all depending on what your body needs. It's really interesting. So smooth muscle is around all the tubes. All right, muscle type number 3 is your heart. And it's called cardiac muscle. And cardiac just means heart. Do you control your heartbeat? Do you say, beat right now? And then you count off another second and say, all right, beat again? You don't. So cardiac muscle, your heart muscle, is also involuntary. You don't control the heartbeat. That's also involuntary. And you can see this picture here is a human heart, and you can see it looks just like muscle. If these guys contract, inside that heart are all these openings and all this space. And inside those spaces, they're filled with blood. Now, the heart, just like just is a fancy tube, and the whole wall of the heart, everywhere you look, is just muscle. So if they all contract and squeeze, all this blood that's inside, think of it, it's like an open fist, and you just squeeze that fist closed. All this blood that's on the inside has nowhere to go but out these big tubes to be circulated. So the heart is really doing nothing more but using its muscles to squeeze, to pump the blood out into those blood vessels. It's to pump blood to help with the circulation. of blood. Circulation just means to move the blood out into those vessels so that your muscles and all the other tissues in your body can get the blood. So your heart is just a big muscle, and when those muscles contract, they pump or they squeeze the blood out, and that's all about circulation, the blood circulation. So we got cardiac muscle, that's your heart. That contracts to pump blood. Skeletal muscle, that's what attaches to the bones. That also contracts to move bones. And if you're moving bones, you're moving you. And smooth muscle also contracts. They all contracts by that mechanism where these proteins grab and pull and do that thing. These also, oops, I'll make that an A. These also contract to squeeze the tubes. To squeeze the tubes inside your body. And when we get to each system, when we talk about the circulatory system, those tubes are moving blood. When we talk about the respiratory system, these tubes might be squeezing air. And when we talk about, and what's shown in this picture here, when they're squeezing in the digestive system, when your intestines are being squeezed, they are moving food along. So you see, you have all sorts of stuff going on in the background that are also controlled by muscles. It's not just about walking across a room, and that's a new idea for you, but it's always done by contraction. One of these is voluntary. Two of these are not voluntary. The one that's voluntary, that you can control, which one is that? I hope you all are saying skeletal muscle. That's what attaches to your bones, and you can control those. The other two types that are involuntary, that you do not control, but that move other things in your body, are your cardiac muscle, that pumps your blood, and your smooth muscle. And depending on what tube that smooth muscle is the wall of, it moves different things depending on what the tube is. All right, a lot of new stuff, a lot of extension about what you know about muscles. We took it to the next level. Watch this again if you want to recap or review. There will be a worksheet on this stuff too, but we are done with muscles.